Welcome to the Bucher and Friends podcast. Here is your host.
Let's send it over to Rick Bucher.
Rick Bucher.
All right, welcome to another episode of Bucher and Friends, part of the United WeCast Network. I'm Rick Bucher. You can read my stuff on Bleacher Report. You can find me on Twitter at Rick Bucher. And you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Bucher Friends. It's my great pleasure to have as a guest he's probably best known as co-owner of the Milwaukee Bucks to most people, Wes Edens. Wes, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, largely because we're here at All-Star Weekend. And just give me your general impressions of what you've seen so far.
You know, it's first of all, thanks for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure. All-Star Weekend is a celebration. It's a celebration of the sport. It's a celebration of the league. It's a celebration of the diversity of our fans and everything that goes with it. So it's just a lot of fun.
So your other co-owner, one of the other co-owners, Mark Lazary, played in the celebrity game. First of all, how much did you watch? Did you pay attention to that particular performance?
This year I got here a little bit late, but I watched it on TV. So I saw a little bit of it on TV. Saw Mark out there, making his way.
And what would it take for us to see Wes Edens out there running up and down the court in shorts?
I don't think it's really for me. I played a lot of basketball at different times, but it's a celebrity game. I don't feel like I'm a celebrity, so I'm happy to watch from the sidelines.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I would just, for me, I think we're comparative ages.
Yep.
Just the idea of getting up and down the floor and knowing there's some 20-somethings out there.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, when I saw Ray Allen and Dante Jones out there, I'm thinking, this is a recipe for some embarrassment here.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of fun. It's a great opportunity to see guys that you don't normally see on the basketball court out there having fun. So Mark does a great job representing us. All
right. So your sports, you were a competitive skier growing up, correct?
I was. Yep.
And you continue to climb rocks or be a rock climber now.
I do. Yep.
Which, by the way, how many owners in the league are in either of those pursuits that you know of?
Not many, maybe no one. I don't know anybody else that climbs. It was a natural for me because I grew up in the mountains. So then you do as an adult what you did as a kid, and it was a big part of my growing up to spend time in the mountains, and I still love it.
I want to say Peter Gruber with the Warriors.
Yeah.
Told me a while back, I think for his 70th birthday, he did some massive climb somewhere to celebrate that.
Oh, that's fun. I got to talk to Peter about that.
Yeah. So you're not alone. I think there's somebody else who's out
great.
there. What is that for you? Because I surf, and so for me, it's an all-consuming out in nature. I can kind of relate it a little bit to rock climbing.
Yeah.
My wife did that for a time. And for me, it's just like I'm not connected to any technology. I have to have my full attention, and I'm at the whims of nature.
Yeah, I think there's probably great similarities. I've only surfed a little bit, but I think that, first of all, I think that it's really positive to do things that make you uncomfortable. And I think it's humbling. I think it's centering. I think it's focusing. It's all those things. And the mountains for me represent so many positive things in my life. And they don't care who you are and what you've done and where you're going. They are there. And it's not a matter of conquering the mountains. That's not the concept. It's really just being a part of it. And you have to pay attention, of course. But it's I love it. What
was the last big rock you climbed?
Last summer, I did a climb called the Cathedral Traverse, which is it's kind of the 3 tallest Tetons in Jackson Hole, which are my favorite parts of the world. So T1, O1, and then you finish on the north face of the Grand. So you climb kind of the steep side of it, and there's this great rock climb called the Italian Cracks. Big committed rock climb at the end of a lot of stomping around to get to that point. So and something I've wanted to do for an awfully long time, and it was really amazing.
What's the dodgiest or riskiest situation you've ever found yourself in climbing?
I've had a few things that have happened. I almost rappelled myself off the rope about 6-7 years ago in a place called Pingora, another big rock climb down in the Wind River Range. And that was a mistake that was made while we're trying to rush and get off a mountain in the middle of a storm. And, it would have been a bad mistake. But it's not so much the exposure from the big climbs that cause the problems. When you can't be roped in necessarily as you kind of move around all these places. Yeah. And so they're not very hard parts necessarily that have real consequences if something bad happens. Yeah. And those are the things that keep you up at night when you think about it. So a little slip and fall here and there.
Last time I clocked myself with my surfboard. It was like 3 feet waves. It was the smallest of waves, and I was kind of goofing around, fell off and popped up, and here comes my board and whack right in the forehead. So I know that very one. When it's real dicey, you're on your game, and you can get a little sloppy when you feel like it's
but it's when you like, that was a couple of days up there, and we had some real weather and 50-mile-an-hour winds, and it blew in a bunch of ice, so we couldn't climb one day, and there's those kinds of things. When you finish a climb like that, when I do that, you're just so cleaned out mentally.
I bet.
You've been so focused for such a long period of time, and if there was a drug you could take that make you feel that way, I would take it. But it's the only way to do it. Is you're just so focused on every footfall for day after day in difficult physical situation, and it's just such a rewarding thing.
And you don't take any technology with you? Are you completely off the grid while you're up there, or
completely off the grid?
Yeah. That's good.
It would not be a positive to have your phone going off in your back pocket.
Now, how long does it take you to decompress and not think about some email or the fact that you're disconnected? How long does it take you to get to that point where you really appreciate that you're disconnected?
It takes a day or two. It's not immediate, because you have all these things running around your brain and all the things you needed to do and want to do. And then as soon as you get kind of slapped in the face by some little part of it, right? Those are pointy rocks.
Yeah.
It tends to move you in the right direction. But it's a wonderful thing. I've been really lucky to have access to it and going to continue it.
So how does a kid who grew up on a ranch in Montana wind up going to Oregon State?
The first year of college, I decided to stay in state, and so I went to Montana State for a year, which probably was not the right decision as I look back on it, because I really was ready to move on. And so I went there, and I had a good first year down there, but I just knew I wanted to move on and do other things. And Montana is an incredible part of the world. I love going back there. Much of my family still lives back there. But I knew very clearly from a pretty young age that there was other things for me. And so when it got to be after 1 year, I said, I just want to move on. And, Oregon is close, but still yet far enough away. And it was a really good choice. I had a really good experience out there, and it kind of really jump-started kind of everything else.
It's interesting to think about all the financial success you've had, and yet I look at the path you've taken and the places that you lived, and it's very sort of off the beaten path. I mean, when I see your residence as New York, it kind of doesn't fit with the appearance or the personal history that I've come to know.
Yeah, I moved to New York, and I was quite sure I'd be there for a year or 2 years at the most, and that was 30 odd years ago. So, but New York has got so many positives as well, and something I really took from my dad is he used to say, focus on the positives and don't let the negatives kind of get to you. And that, in many respects, is just a great way to go about it. And New York has so many positives. It's an incredible place, incredible diversity. People really care about what they're doing. They're trying hard. The fact that it's also urban, and you maybe don't have as much access to the outdoors. Other things are maybe not some of the positives, but it's been a good place. And from a business standpoint, it's been obviously it's the epicenter of the financial universe. So it's been a really good place to be.
So being raised on a ranch in Montana.
Yep.
By a psychologist, dad, and a school teacher, mom.
Yep.
How do you think that's shaped you and your worldview?
Well, I think in kind of every respect, and I think that's a really interesting question. I think both psychology and school teaching require a great deal of empathy, and I consider myself a very empathetic person. I try to take the other perspective on things. I think that's helped me a great deal professionally, frankly, from the investment standpoint, and so. They're both highly intelligent, big readers, love the outdoors, and they're great empathetic individuals. And so they were really great role models for that.
So in looking at that, how do you think when you look at you've been, I think Wall Street Journal referred to you as the underdog investor, which I don't know, do you agree with it? Do you like that kind of tag and what it suggests?
Well, I think that underdogs are frequently just misunderstood, right? And that's the way I think of the opportunities, is that it's not so much to pick something because it's an underdog, but I try to find things where I think maybe I see something where others don't. And so it's less a matter of picking something specifically because it's an underdog, but more the attributes are of it. It may not be well known, it may be not well understood, and that's been the source of some good opportunities over time.
I would think so, and which kind of brings us to the Milwaukee Bucks.
There you go.
Because a lot of people would look at that investment and look at Milwaukee and the challenges at the time in terms of a new arena and all that. What was it that you saw in that situation that appealed to you?
Well, first of all, Milwaukee and Wisconsin are tremendous hotbeds for sports. When you look at the support that they give for the local colleges, whether it's Marquette or the University of Wisconsin, and then of course you look at the support of the Packers, which their following across the state, I think, is unparalleled across the NFL. Right, so there's no question that they are great sports fans, and the Bucks had lost their way a little bit and were out of favor, and so maybe that contributed to where they were. Senator Cole, I think, was a great steward of the team for many, many years, but sometimes change is what you need to kind of move it around, and they had this situation where they needed a new arena to come into the standard for the rest of it, and that was certainly a challenge. But I thought when you looked at it, there'd be support if we did this the right way, and it turned out that way. And
I heard coming in that you and Mark just randomly attend NBA games across the country.
Yeah.
Are you just happen to be in an area, you check the schedule, you buy a ticket, is it planned out? And are you just kind of rolling in and checking things out, or how does that go?
Yeah, look, I'm a junkie, right? I really love the sport. I think it's an amazing product that they've got, and so whether I can watch it randomly in an arena, because I'll travel and see our team, but other teams too, right?
Yeah.
Or watch it on TV. I think that the product has gotten better and better and better. I think that this year is an incredible year. So there's literally just about nothing I'd rather watch on TV. I don't watch that much TV, but if I turn it on, I'm going to turn on an NBA channel and go see who's on.
The first thing I noticed, even before you guys moved into the new building, there was a different vibe in the building. I think part of it was the supporters section and the MKE, but there was just like a cool factor that, quite honestly, when I had come into Milwaukee to watch the Bucks, I liked it because of the tradition of the franchise, and that it did have that kind of hometown feel, but it also felt like we're still 1974, right?
Yeah,
and I liked, you guys have found a way to kind of combine the two, and I just wonder how you came to that, or how you fostered that.
Yeah, when we went to a game and we were looking at the team, it was a Saturday afternoon, and the Bucks were the worst team in the league, and it was not a very exciting environment at that point, which is not the fair time, because like Saturday afternoon in the middle of March at the end of a long season is not such exciting. But I think when you look at the world we live in now, people have got these amazing television screens that are stuck up on their walls, and they've got a great way to experience it from their homes.
Yeah.
You have to make the environment be something that makes them want to get out of the house and go to the arena. And so, like all good decisions we've made in the Bucks, and I mean literally all of them, they really all started by like who we hired. And so, we hired Peter Fagan to run, our business side of it. And Peter has been a tremendous ambassador for us out there. And we just said, let's create the best environment that we can. Now, we had some limitations with that when we had, the old building. Yeah. But we still, I think, I'm glad you felt that way, because we certainly felt that, we rebranded the team. We got different colors. We got different gear. We made, the supporters section. We did all the things we could do. And now, of course, it's gone to a completely different level with the new arena.
Right. Well, I have to admit that the first time that I noticed it, I was there when the Warriors came in undefeated. So the atmosphere was kind of lit, and that was a back-to-back after going into double overtime, I think, against Boston the night before, right?
Yeah.
And so your fans were in full throat for sure.
Did you see our shirts?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. The whole no, and I loved it. But that was a thing. There was some forethought, and there was some cheekiness, and there was just there was a lot of elements there.
It's a really funny story. So we had played Portland earlier in the week, and we won. Actually, John Henson made a big block at the end of the game. It was a really competitive game. And I went back in the locker room afterwards, and I was talking to Coach Kidd, and I said, I've got an idea. We play the Warriors, in a few days. If they win out the next couple of games, they're going to come in here in 24-0. And I think we should make up these shirts that say 24-1. And he said, "Oh, I think that's a really bad idea."
Did he really?
Oh, yeah. And I said, "No, come on, this will be fun. And if we win, we'll be famous for having called it. Yeah. If we lose, there'll be kids like in Africa wearing 24-1 shirts. We'll laugh about it."
Right.
And it's one of those things. And it worked out, and it was really funny. And of course, then I think the Warriors took it, seriously. I think Steph actually asked us for a copy of one of those shirts, which we sent to him. It's all good fun, right? They are such an amazing team that year, and you're right. We caught them in the last game of a long road trip, and they had just played the Celtics really tough. So very funny though.
But give your guys credit. I mean, they stepped to it too, and it was a lot of fun just to be in that atmosphere in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
That was the great distinction for me. All right, one of the other elements that, speaking of great teams and chasing championships, that's obviously something that you have in mind. We're just coming out of the news of Anthony Davis asking for the trade request out of New Orleans. That's brought up the whole subject of small markets and their ability to maintain or retain their superstars. You guys have one in Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, in looking at this situation, and he's coming up, he's not that far away from it. When you see the Anthony Davis situation, what does that make you think?
Yeah, obviously we're very blessed. We didn't draft Giannis. He was there the year before we took over the team, and then he turned out to be who I think he's the best player in the NBA. I really do. I think he deserves to be the MVP this year, the way that he's playing. And I my own view is that it's not about the big market and small market for the most part. I think the players just want to win. And, the NBA has such great recognition worldwide. And it started, when Kevin Durant got his, giant shoe contract when he was in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City's not a giant market. Right. And you can just see that, people around the world, and I see people around the world all the time who tell me they watch the NBA. And they may not know where Milwaukee is on the map, but they know the Milwaukee Bucks because they know of Giannis.
Right.
And so I don't think that there's, inferior opportunities for the players at all from a monetary standpoint. I personally think they're all super competitive and they want to win. And so if you want to have the best environment, keep these players there, you have to plan to have a winning team. And that's what we do.
I would also think that with your background, I mean, if there's one other element that's attractive that we're seeing with superstar players now, is that they want to get involved in business and investments, and they want to do it before they retire. Yep. They want to do it while they're hot, which I think is very smart. I would think that you at least have the wherewithal to say to Giannis, look, I live in New York. You don't have to live in New York, and I can provide you with all the investment expertise that you might need, and you can still play in Milwaukee.
Yeah, we obviously there's a lot of rules that govern what you can and can't do for people, so it's not a direct investing thing. But I tell these guys, very openly that I'm the free guy. If they have questions about an investment, they're looking at something, I'm happy to give them my free, unbiased advice about what I think about it. They've got this relatively short window of really high earnings, right? Mm-hmm. That probably constitutes 90% of what they expect to earn in a lifetime. And so making the most of their time on the court, but also then really preparing themselves for a much longer time off the court is really, really important. And I think, I think the league is very focused on it. The Players Association, Michelle Roberts and those folks are very focused on it in a very positive way. And I think there's been great strides made in the right direction, but there's a lot more that can be done, in my opinion.
Yeah. Also, I just look at the history, and as you said, Giannis was drafted before you guys bought the team. I don't know if you knew what you had in an asset in him when you bought the team, right? Yeah. That was right on the cusp. But the international players seem to have more of a tendency of, I'm glad to be in the NBA. I don't like the Gasols in Memphis, Tim Duncan while American Virgin Islands, Manu Ginobili, you don't see international players as eager to say, I got to live in a particular place. And I wonder whether you think about that and that may work as an advantage for you in this situation.
It's funny. I've had exactly this conversation with some of our guys. I think that also you have to remember the lives that these guys lead is one where they're always on the road, right? So a great deal of their time is spent, driving back and forth to the practice facility when they're in town or to games and then being on the road. And so where they choose to make their, off-season homes is maybe a different choice. But I think a place like Milwaukee, although, it's a little cold in the wintertime, but you can get, to your house, to the arena in a matter of minutes. You don't have the same kind of, challenges you might have in a bigger city. So I think for a lot of players, they view that very attractively. And Giannis, I know, really does. He loves being there with his family. He's a big, big part of the community. I think it's a real positive for him.
It's also, I didn't realize how close to the lake you guys are.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people do. I went out to I think George Karl was with the team the first time I went out there, and either he took me for a drive or we were going to his house or whatever it was, and I was like, whoa! And it was summertime.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not a side of Milwaukee I've ever seen before. Like, is there any compulsion to advertise more of that or kind of make people, do a little Chamber of Commerce work? Because it caught me by surprise.
In the Summerfest, which is our big music festival, I think might be the biggest outdoor music festival in the country. It's an incredible thing that people come from all over the country, all over the world to go to. The lake is right there. The lake during the summer months is amazing. Mm-hmm. The lake in the winter months is a little bit cold. We looked at all the different possible sites where we could have put a building, and one of them was down there by the lakefront.
Oh, really?
And we were there on a beautiful, fall afternoon, and with, of course, a real estate agent telling us extolling the virtues of it. Right. And I'm like, I'm not sure this is where we want to be in the middle of February. So,
but the wind off of that might be.
I think Milwaukee is a really underrated town. It's a real foodie town. Yeah. It's got a lot of history to it. And it's a cool place.
I grew up in Cincinnati, so I've long said it was a great place to grow up, great place to settle down. You should be forced to leave for a while, like for at least 2 or 3 years, just to know that there's someplace else. But in the same way, culturally. Mark Twain said, when the world comes to an end, I want to be in Cincinnati because it won't hit there till 20 years later. And it still holds some of that. But culturally, it's a really nice place that people I don't think are aware of. And I feel like Milwaukee has some of that same aspect.
Yeah, and I think we were very focused on keeping the arena downtown and really doing our part to rebuild downtown. And I don't know if you had a chance to come, but
I haven't been to the new building yet.
The new building is, immodestly, it's amazing. It's an incredible building. We're so proud of kind of what has been built there. And you can see what's being built now around it. And it's only going to accelerate. We really want it to be the best place for people to live, work, play in Milwaukee. And I think it's well on the way of that. And it's really following a pattern you've seen in lots of, Midwestern cities where there's kind of regenerating these downtowns. And I think it's going to be a really cool spot.
How much has LA Live inspired so many of these situations? They've created an oasis in downtown that was previously a wasteland.
Yeah,
that is fully contained, and I see so many other places that people are doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think that there has to be a first always, and I think that may well have been the first because that was not a really great part of LA, right. And now it's an incredible spot and a good example of what an arena can do to really anchor an entertainment district. We went around and we were looking at different models for what we wanted to accomplish. Columbus, Ohio has done a really good job in downtown. I don't know if you've been to their thing where the hockey arena is and it's actually a terrific, example. Exactly. Yeah. The stuff that's been developed around the baseball park in St. Louis and now in Atlanta. There's lots of examples of this now, but I think that it really did start in LA.
How do you feel about kind of shifting back to the small market and the superstars? You mentioned that winning cures a lot and can be the great antidote to everything. The league has tried to put some advantages, financial advantages, to balance it, to give the small markets a chance, which has essentially not worked. Is there anything else that you would like to see or you could see the league doing that would balance the scales or give markets? Let's face it. Winning certainly cures it. Not everybody can do it on a timeline, depending on where they are, to satisfy a superstar, and even that might not be enough.
Yeah. And I think it's a great question. I think the league is very focused on it, and they recognize that the value of the product is much greater if you have a competitive league. Yeah. So there's other leagues. I won't pick on anybody, but there's other leagues which have become more coastal, where there's a couple of examples of really great franchises in different parts and then other parts of the league not so competitive. I think the NBA doesn't have a lot of that, and I think for the most part it's a pretty competitive and balanced league. It's hard though when one of the reasons there's been so little diversity in champions though is that your best player is on the court for most of the game. Yeah. You think about it in football, Tom Brady's an amazing quarterback. He's going to play half the plays. LeBron James has been in 8 straight finals. He's out there during the finals for 92% of the minutes or whatever it is, right? Yeah. So you have to be blessed to have that superstar, and then you have to have made the right organizational choices to be able to support the crew around them.
It's also with small markets, as I see it, financially, you're usually a little more hamstrung when it comes to financial mistakes. Like if you're in a big market, if you're in New York, you're in LA, you can kind of swing and miss a couple times and eat it and still be okay. It's harder to finance that in the smaller markets, is it not?
I think it is. I think that's definitely true. I mean, when you look at I haven't done the study on this. It'd be an interesting one. I would bet if you looked at the last 5 or 10 years, the bulk of the teams that are the Final Four playing are in the luxury cap.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it's a big market or a small market, when you have that moment when you think you can win, you have to be willing to invest in it.
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And maybe that's that moment for us. So we'll find out.
It's just looking at small markets over the last 20 years. There's only 2 that have won championships: Cleveland, and that one they kind of backed into, and San Antonio, which had a great run, but sort of an outlier. When you look at that and you have the aspiration of the Milwaukee Bucks being the next small market to win a championship, how do you get there? Like, what do you see as the path?
Well, take San Antonio. We think that that's a real model for what you want. And I believe it has everything to do with, the organization that you put in place and the people you hire to kind of run those key parts of the organization. San Antonio is blessed because they've got an incredibly talented general manager, an incredibly talented coach and coaching staff, and they seem to work seamlessly together. I'm sure, like all things, if you get behind the scenes, there's probably lots of friction and things I don't see, but you can see what the results are. But they've had a tremendous amount of consistency for a long period of time with very talented people kind of running that.
Yeah.
And, of all the things that we've done in Milwaukee since I've been involved in the last 5 years, what I'm most proud of, honestly, is, the people that we have now put in place to run the place, right? So Peter was there from day one on the business side, but then we hired John Horst, who was the youngest, GM in the league, and he's done a tremendous job. And then, maybe the best trade of the offseason was bringing in, Coach Bud and his staff, because his staff is very talented, and they've done a tremendous job, and you can really see how well they operate together. And it's easy to say when you're 29 games above 500, and you can point it out, but I actually think that there's a real cause and effect there.
Right. Are there, other than San Antonio, is there anybody else that you've studied as a blueprint to say, I really admire what they've done, or their small market success can be replicated in our market? I
think Indiana is doing a tremendous job right now. I think Oklahoma City is doing a tremendous job right now. I think that those are also, look at the tremendous fan bases that they have in those regions, right? Mm-hmm. They've done a great job with that. The ownership in both those places has done a great job. They've got superstars on there. Unfortunately, Indiana had the injury to Victor because he's such a talented player. They're still a heck of a team. They gave us a tough game the other night, and so they're still very competitive. But I think that there have been other examples, but I think it has a lot to do with organization, consistency, and then just real excellence of the people that really make those places work.
So those teams are all competitive. And I can see this is the distinction, and I've kind of made this, like, for small markets, to build a consistently winning team is certainly something that is realistic to aspire to, and you should be able to get there if you're smart about it. Climbing the mountain all the way to the top, not to use a reference that you can probably relate to, that's the missing integer that I think is cracking the code, essentially. Like, how do you get that last 30 feet to the summit?
Yeah, there's a little bit of luck involved, right? That's you want to talk about. I mean, Giannis, 14 teams passed on him, mm-hmm. right? So him and Kawhi Leonard, the 2 best 15th round, picks of all time, right? So again, easy to say in hindsight, but you need to have, I don't believe that there is, for the most part, a quick fix to the NBA. I think if you have a franchise and you want it to do well, you really need to plan for the long term. You have to build to the draft, do it organically, maybe then get really lucky by finding some pieces, in the rough, or things that really work well together. And that's what we've had this year, knock wood. So, but I think it really comes from taking a long-term view and being really disciplined and sticking to it, and then getting a little lucky.
The other part, and speaking to the luck, which is health, and I had this conversation with Sam Presti, GM of the Thunder, and their view of it is like, let us just stay, and I think Portland even kind of has done the same thing. Let us just stay competitive year in and year out. Like, keep us in the mix. We may not be the favorite. We may not be top 5, but you never know when an injury is going to happen and the door is going to open and you have like a Dallas walking through it, or where circumstance, you were prepared, the opportunity presented itself, and you were good enough to go through it, even if you weren't necessarily the best. You're basically an opportunist, which again, now that I think about it, and I'm just processing this as we do the podcast, it's kind of your MO. Yeah. Like, I'm going to look for the quirky opportunity and wait until the time is ripe, and then it's going to unfold for me. And maybe that's what we're looking at with the Bucks.
Yeah, success is the residue of design and hard work, right? So do the hard work, make good decisions, hire the right people, put those right people on the court, and then have a little good fortune.
Yeah.
You couldn't have guessed, the intangible impacts that a player like Giannis would have, right? And intangibles being his competitive spirit is second to none.
Yep.
And that has an impact throughout the entire organization, certainly with his teammates, but everywhere else. And that's just good fortune on our part to have ended up with that. And then our job then is to make the most of that.
You also are part owner in Aston Villa, English Premier League team. Do you borrow your experience from the two, the NBA franchise and the European soccer club? Is there carryover? What are the similarities and differences there in working those two?
I think that there's more similarities than there are differences. I think that you have, the names are different. So rather than a GM, you have a sporting director, and rather than a coach, you have a manager.
Do you ever find yourself having to get yourself in the right lexicon when you're talking to somebody?
There's definitely, in many ways, there's the American English translation that you need at times. But I think that the seeds of success are the same. I think the structures are the same. What is really different, though, is that even more so than the NBA, talent is so worldwide distributed. There's soccer players, talented soccer players everywhere. There's leagues everywhere. And there's huge discrepancies, I think, in absolute value and players in different levels. And so, we obviously scout extensively in Europe on the NBA, and it's been very successfully so. And you look at the incredible, talent that's come out of there. But I think in football and soccer, that's even more of a requirement, and it's something you have to make a big investment into. When we brought John Horst in to be our GM, I said, John, I want to be a data-driven organization. I want to make good judgments at the end, but I want to make them. I always tell people in our businesses, great judgment, overrated. Great information, underrated.
Yeah.
And because truly, if you have great information, most of the decisions are pretty darn simple, really.
Yeah.
And so I feel like in soccer, they've got a long ways to go in terms of analytics, data, and so I feel like there's a lot to be caught up to, honestly. Huh. And I believe in the end there's a number of NBA owners and U.S. sports owners that have done tremendously well. Stan Kroenke at Arsenal, John Henry at Liverpool. Obviously, they've got a tremendous team. So, and I've talked to both of them and others about their experiences, and I think that there are a lot more similarities than differences, but there are some big differences for sure.
Well, and it's interesting when it comes to the analytics and it comes to owners, because I've heard this complaint from basketball people, which is there's too much reliance on the numbers, that whether it takes the soul of the game or it misses some sort of element, the human element that has to be factored in. You, as somebody who kind of flies around and watches games, and I don't know if a basketball junkie is an appropriate term, but to have a passion for the game, but also come from an analytics aspect. How do you what do you make of that argument from the basketball people that there are too many owners that are just numbers driven, and we're missing something in doing that?
Yeah, it's a balance. Look, I am a basketball junkie, and I love the game as a fan, and I'm now a much more informed fan than I was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Right, I was a big New York Knicks fan when before we invested in the Bucks, and so I watched a lot of basketball, and I thought I was a knowledgeable fan, and I might have been knowledgeable on that level. But once you become an owner, you see how little you really, get access to as a fan. But I think that it's not to say that good judgment, basketball judgment. Like we have, Rod Thorne is an advisor of ours. Rod just went in the Hall of Fame, and deservedly so. He's been around forever, done everything, and his judgment is tremendously valuable, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not merely the data. But I do think the foundation of it should be data-driven. And I think that's where, when you talk about underdogs and whatnot, it's just that I have this very high motor to try to see things for what they are. And that's what the data allows you to do if you just apply it properly. But then you need good judgment at the end, of course. But if it's really, balanced by this underpinning of data and information, you just likely make much better decisions.
Have you ever played cards with Rod?
I have not played. I've played golf with Rod.
Okay. Well, okay.
Rod is one of the world's most competitive people. He's maybe the worst loser in any golf course I've been around.
It would apply with cards too.
That doesn't shock me at all. We have a lot of fun.
All right. As we wrap this up, I'm just curious. When you look at all of your investments, and I would think maybe apply this to non-financial. The greatest investment you ever made was blank because blank.
Yeah, it's an easy one. The best investment I ever made was the Milwaukee Bucks, right? I mean, it's we made the investment at a time when it was very clear to us, to me, that the media contract was just about ready to change. There was a giant step. Remember, we paid the most money that was ever paid for an NBA franchise. People think that's a joke, but it was $550 million.
Because there wasn't an arena.
It wasn't an arena. So $550 million. We paid the highest price that had ever been paid. And of course, we had that distinction for about 3 weeks until Steve Ballmer paid $2 billion for the Clippers,
which you weren't mad about.
Wasn't mad about, but it was very clear. But I think from a financial standpoint, obviously very good. The reason why it is like the joy that it brings every part of my life. So my kids are very engaged in it. That's a lot of fun. My friends are. The fans get a lot of joy out of it. It's just been, really a joyous thing. And it's obviously been a good investment, and we think it's got a long ways to go. It's so interesting. We were, today they had the announcement where the NBA was going to start a league in Africa.
Yes.
Right. We just had this African thing, which I spent a lot of time in Africa. I'll be there in a couple of weeks on business. And so I think that's great. And it can have such a huge impact in terms of, changing people's lives
Sure.
and giving access to it. So it's a wonderful investment on many levels, but it's a good financial one, but a lot of fun as well.
I went to the first Basketball Without Borders.
Oh, there you go.
In Africa, which was phenomenal in terms of the facilities that they were working on or working with, and having these NBA players come in there. But I'll never forget walking in, and I walked into an empty gym. They were in a different gym, and I looked up at the backboard, the glass backboard, and there was all these handprints above the rim. And I was like, some kids must have climbed up there, been fooling around. And then I saw the scrimmages, and I was like, holy cow, look at, what is here. And some of the stories, and I don't know how much you've experienced this or been made aware of it, but some of them are heartbreaking in that as soon as someone demonstrates any sort of talent, they then become somebody that we think of people glomming on here. There, like they'll kidnap somebody from the family and hold them hostage until they're cut in on deals that haven't even happened yet. I mean, it's shocking what it is and yet what it could be.
Yeah, look, I think sport can be such a unifying force. It really can be. And I think, so Africa, what Adam said today, there's 35 players that are either born in Africa or that they have at least one parent that was born there. So that's almost 10% of the league, right? It's a huge portion of the league and growing. And all you have to do is walk around the streets in Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire or Ghana, and you see, just the big, athletic looking people walking around. You know that the potential is there. So it's a great initiative on the part of the league. But I think the impact that it can have in those communities and in those environments to create economic growth, because not everyone's going to grow up to be an NBA basketball player.
Sure.
But just being exposed to it in a process, getting an education, all that kind of stuff is so positive. So it's pretty exciting.
Cool. So we, as we say goodbye, we're here in Charlotte at the All-Star Game. Milwaukee is one of, I think, 4 new buildings that has yet to host it. Chicago, I believe, so it'll go to 3 because Chicago will next year. And I wanted to say somebody else had dibs on. I
think it goes Chicago, Indiana, Cleveland.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay.
So there's a run of Midwest cities, which probably is not good for us. But I think we have the best building in the league, and we deserve an All-Star game. And I'm a big proponent of it. I think Milwaukee should be celebrated. I'd love to be the host and show you and everybody else around the city in the middle of February. But we'll throw our hat in the ring for sure. And I'm sure that at some point we'll get it, and it can't happen soon enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Fair enough. Well, Wes, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All right, that does it for another episode of Bucher and Friends. In our next podcast, Ryan Hollins and I will look at the stretch run of the NBA season. Will the Lakers be in or out of the playoffs? And how much will that impact the Lakers' ability to get a second star this summer? We'll also dig into the story of disgraced referee Tim Donaghy that has resurfaced. Ryan played during Donaghy's time as a ref, and we'll get his take on what Donaghy was like and if he ever suspected he was up to something. And I'll also share what I know from my referee contacts in the league, not only about Donaghy, but a few other referees that weren't necessarily in favor. All that and more in the next podcast. Thanks for listening.